A bright future for the world at large versus making one country great again at the expense of others? That seems to be the contrast between the vision shared by China and Russia and the vision of the United States, as illustrated by a lengthy joint statement issued during Chinese President Xi Jinping's state visit to Russia. The comprehensive statement lays out 10 major areas where the two sides will deepen their strategic coordination, safeguard the post-World War II international order, and defend international fairness and justice. Bilateral cooperation will cover areas including defending the historical memory of the Second World War, pushing back together against what they call neo-colonialism by certain countries, and enhancing regional cooperation. Now, this year marks the 80th anniversary of the victories of the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression, the Soviet Union's Great Patriotic War, and the founding of the United Nations. Amid the Ukraine crisis and Donald Trump's tariff war, how should we understand this new level of coordination between China and Russia? Why does the correct understanding of the legacy of the anti-fascist war mean in today's world? And from Western media's perspective, China and Russia are joining hands to counter the US-led world order. Is this really the case? I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by Victor Gao, Chair Professor at Suzhou University, and from Moscow by Russian political analyst Dmitry Babich. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Now, this is the 11th visit to Russia by Chinese President Xi Jinping in his current capacity, and the second time that he attends the Victory Day military parade in Moscow's Red Square, the last time being 10 years ago. As I said, he's also paying a state visit to Russia. Victor, what does the event mean for both countries?
I think President Xi Jinping's state visit to Russia as we speak, as well as his personal attendance of the victory ceremony marking the 80th anniversary of the victory against Nazi Germany, is a great milestone in China-Russian relations, and also is a very important event in contemporary international politics. Now, for China and Russia, through this joint communique or declaration, they push the China-Russian relations to a new, unprecedented level of importance, making sure that people in both countries and the governments of all levels in both countries are fully cognizant of the importance of their bilateral relations, and they will be oriented in the right way in implementing all the important government policy initiatives in the years to come. Now, internationally, I think this joint communique or declaration also informed the rest of the world how China and Russia see the megatrends in the world of today, what are the sensitivities they want to highlight, and how peace and development can be maintained in the coming years and in the coming decades. So it's a great milestone for China and Russia and for the world.
Dmitry, let me go to you. The statement is very comprehensive, and it noted that the relations between China and Russia have reached the highest level in history with a steady and across-the-board development. Is this only about the two countries? What does it mean for the ordinary men and women, let's say, watching in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America? Does it make a difference for them as well?
I think it does in a lot of ways. For Russia and China, history is very important, because what we're seeing now from the United States is an attempt to twist history. I mean, when Mr. Trump says that the United States was the most important country in defeating Nazism and Japanese militarism, this is simply not true, because if you look at facts, well-known historical facts, you cannot deny the fact that Russia and China sacrificing tens of millions of lives. These two countries played the main role in destroying the very dangerous ideologies of Nazism and Japanese militarism. Unfortunately, Mr. Trump, when he says it, he uses the ignorance of an average American. An average American has been told by television for many years that the World War II was a kind of anti-Semitic operation on the side of Germany, Of course, anti-Semitism is terrible, and it was a very important part of Hitler's aggression. But Hitler's main goal was to, rule the world, get the supremacy in the world. And Russia and China, it's a historical fact, were the main obstacles in this terrible plan. As for other countries, as for the global South, look, there is a new colonialism. There is a new kind of racism spreading in the world. The United States and their allies, they divide the world into democracies and autocracies, and they appropriate the right to decide which country is a democracy and which country is an autocracy. They decided arbitrarily. They never asked the international community. They ignore, in this sense, their post-war legislation, which empowers the United Nations, the UN, to decide which country trespassed certain rules. Mm-hmm. So, if in the old times racism was based on race and on the way your face looks like, now the new racists tell us that they are more democratic than we are, that they are more humane than we are. And that makes them somehow superior to Russians, Chinese, people of Africa, people of Asian countries. And this is simply not true. It's a new, if you look at the depth of it, it's a new racism, which instead of facial features and biological, so-called biological foundations, uses the new terrible ways to divide people. We're all equal in reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite explicit in some opinion polls, which are very telling. For instance, a survey conducted by a French polling station, as illustrated by the Libération newspaper in 1945, found that 57%, or the great majority of Parisians representing the French people, believe that the USSR, or Soviet Union, contributed the most to achieving victory in the Second World War, larger than the United States' role. But 70 years later, by 2015, the impression completely flipped. The majority of French people came to believe that the Americans contributed the most in defeating Nazi Germany. Victor, what are the factors behind this change? And the trend is still deepening as we speak, 10 years later.
Thank you. You are raising a very important question. Allow me to make some very brief comments. First of all, the international order that we are still living in through, established back in 1945, was never meant to be unilateral, was never meant to allow any single country to dominate above the rest of the world. It was established as a multilateral world centered around the United Nations. But now there is one single country which believes it's the only hegemon. It wants to dictate terms to the other countries, and it wants to rewrite history as if it won the Second World War against Nazi Germany and Japanese fascism. The reality is absolutely just the opposite, because Soviet Union in the European theater and China in the Asian Pacific theater really took on the brunt of the assault of these two invading armies, for example, and we sacrificed the most in defeating Nazi Germany in the European theater and Japanese fascism in the Asian Pacific theater. This is the reality. But why should the United States want to tinker around with history? Because it wanted to line up all these elements of falsehood and fabrication, for example, to boost its claim that it is now the only hegemon in the world. Therefore, it is entitled to hold a gun at your head and dictate terms with you in trade talks, in tariffs, or in otherwise. I think the reason why China and Russia and all the other peace-loving countries need to really defend the true legacy of the Second World War is to demonstrate that the international order based on multilateralism should be preserved, and we should not allow any single country to practice the new colonialism or new imperialism by holding a gun at your head.
Yeah, both of you have mentioned the word neocolonialism. How ironic, because how interesting, because that was the word given to China when China deepened economic and developmental cooperation with African countries. Western media accused China of neo-colonialism, but now this joint statement says that certain countries are obsessed with hegemonism and neo-colonialism, recklessly pursuing aggressive policies. In order to protect their own privileges, they restrict other nations' sovereignty and suppress their economic and technological development. Dmitry, how do you see the significance of China and Russia using this word in this context now against, very clearly, the United States and some of its allies?
Well, I'm very glad that Russia and China are finally getting the initiative in this global dispute with the West. Because for many years, we have been, I would say, too polite to the West. We never insulted Americans. We never insulted the European Union. We expected them to come to terms with us because economically, Russia and China were very good partners for the European Union and for the United States. But unfortunately, we see how ideology, how propaganda is taking the upper hand in the United States over common sense. Mr. Trump, I mean, his trade war against China is not dictated by any economic necessity. The United States' so-called prosperity from the 90s is mostly due to the use of Chinese labor. And again, this is history. You cannot deny it.
Well,
but unfortunately, the United States is denying history, and in this way, it insults us. And we want to fight this new colonialism by peaceful means.
You touch upon a very important, Mr. Dmitry. Mr. Babic, I have to interrupt here because time is very limited, and I want to get Mr. Victor's. Victor's perspective on this. For instance, the statement also explicitly says China and Russia will join hands to counter the U.S.'s double containment against China and Russia. Does this mean there's going to be more hostile confrontation between China and Russia on one hand and the United States and its ally on another hand? Victor, keep it really brief, please. 1 minute if you can.
Yeah, I think the United States government is really designing for this containment against China. I know more about their China containment policy than against their Russian containment policy. But in the joint declaration, this double containment is really speaking about the facts. Now, the United States wants to dominate above China and bully China on the one hand, and also dominate above the Russian Federation and bully the Russian Federation. Now, the Chinese people and the Russian people will never allow that to take place because we will strongly resist it. And that actually is one of the reasons why China-Russian consolidation and solidarity
are we going to go into
deepening.
Greater confrontation, though? That's my question.
No, I hope eventually people will realize in Washington that both China and Russia are nuclear weapon states, and between and among nuclear powers, war is not an option at all. So hopefully minds will come back to sanity and rationality in Washington, and they will eventually agree with me that peaceful means dialogue and diplomacy are better ways than warmongering.
Yeah, well, in the joint statement, there is a clear stipulation about respecting the agreement, the consensus among all 5 major countries in the Security Council about the no first use of nuclear weapons. The nuclear war cannot be fought and cannot be won. We'll keep a close watch on the situation. Many thanks to Victor Gao, but stay with us here in the studio. We'll continue to have the privilege of your insights. And many thanks to Russian political analyst Dmitry Babic.